It was supposed to be a straightforward evening, a bipartisan gala hosted at the historic Kennedy Center, attended by senators, celebrities, judges, and former presidents. The theme was bridging the divide, an ironic choice, considering the tension in the room. Cameras rolled for a national broadcast, and every word would be scrutinized by the media. Donald Trump was in attendance, flanked by his usual entourage. He was scheduled to deliver a 10-minute speech following an award presentation to none other than Denzel Washington, the night's honoree for his humanitarian work and public service initiatives that spanned decades. Denzel's appearance alone sparked hushed whispers. He had recently spoken out against political corruption, and though he never named names, everyone knew who he meant. As the host introduced Denzel to a roaring applause, Trump leaned over to one of his aides and said something that was picked up, barely, by a nearby hot mic: "Get him off the stage. He's not staying." People thought it was a joke. A bad one. But then Secret Service agents were seen moving toward the side of the stage. Something was happening. Cameras subtly panned away, and the live feed cut to a wide angle of the room. Denzel reached the podium, smiled, and thanked the audience. But before he could finish his first line, a commotion stirred behind the curtain. A voice came through an earpiece: "Mr. Washington, there's been a security request. You're being asked to step down for protocol." Denzel paused. He turned to the side curtain where the agent stood. Then slowly, calmly, he said into the mic, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been asked to step away, for protocol. But I've got one thing to say before I go." The entire room froze. Denzel stood tall at the podium, gripping its edges, not with defiance, but with purpose. He smiled slightly, as though he had rehearsed for this very moment, not knowing when it would come, but knowing it eventually would. He leaned into the microphone and calmly said, "You can silence a microphone. You can cut a broadcast. But you can't stop the truth from walking in the front door." The audience murmured, confused but intrigued. Cameras zoomed in again, something was happening, and the production crew knew it. Behind Denzel, two security agents hesitated. They weren't sure what orders they were following anymore. The request had come indirectly, through political staffers, not official channels. And now, under the eyes of hundreds of live witnesses and media outlets, any move could become a headline. Then Denzel reached into his jacket, not fast, not carelessly, and pulled out a small, folded letter. "I wasn't going to read this. I was going to let the night be about unity. But since I've been invited to leave, I think it's time people heard the letter that arrived on my desk 2 weeks ago, from a whistleblower inside the very office trying to push me off this stage." Suddenly the crowd gasped. Even Trump, seated in the second row, stiffened. Senators exchanged looks. Journalists quietly began texting their editors. The aides near Trump whispered nervously. Denzel unfolded the letter with steady hands and said, "The content of this letter exposes the deliberate effort to use federal influence to silence public voices ahead of the election cycle, and it names names." The room was now dead silent. No one moved. Not a fork clinked. Not a phone buzzed. And Denzel, standing tall under the lights, looked directly at Donald Trump, then back to the audience. "You want me gone? You'll have to remove everyone who still believes in truth." Denzel's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Every word he read carried the weight of unspoken truth, and the entire Kennedy Center seemed to hold its breath. This document outlines how a list of public figures, myself included, have been flagged internally as communication risks ahead of the coming election. These are citizens, not politicians. Not activists. Just people who refuse to be quiet. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. A few in the audience gasped audibly. Cameras panned to Trump, who now sat frozen, his jaw locked tight. One of his aides reached toward a phone, only to have it gently pushed down by another hand. This was now too big for damage control via tweets. Denzel continued, "It includes notes from internal meetings. It describes pressure on law enforcement agencies to intervene during public appearances, should any one of us go off script. And it has initials signed at the bottom. He looked down at the signature. DJT, the sound of that hit like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted. Senators from both sides turned toward Trump, some whispering, others stunned into silence. Denzel folded the paper again and placed it on the podium. So let me be clear. I'm not here to play politics. I don't care about party lines. I care about truth. About freedom. About the fact that when the most powerful man in the country tries to control who gets to speak, we've already lost something sacred. The audience began to applaud. Slowly at first, then louder. Some stood. A standing ovation was forming, one Trump could not stop. He stood abruptly, scowling, and tried to leave, but the cameras followed him. A reporter called out, "Mr. Trump, did you order Denzel's removal?" Trump said nothing. He just walked. Back on stage, Denzel raised one hand. Let this be a message to anyone trying to shut down the truth. We're not going anywhere. As Trump exited the hall, flanked by his aides, the media swarm ignited. Reporters from every major outlet pushed toward the lobby, phones raised, trying to catch a quote, anything. But Trump remained tight-lipped, jaw clenched, heading straight for the motorcade. Inside the Kennedy Center, the energy had flipped. What began as a polished bipartisan gala was now a turning point, live on national television. Denzel remained at the podium, steady as ever. I didn't come here to expose anyone. But I won't be pushed off a stage for doing the right thing. Not when the country needs to see it. The ovation grew louder. Audience members, many of them lawmakers, looked visibly shaken, not just by the letter, but by the realization that this moment was no longer political, it was cultural. A dividing line had been drawn, and Denzel had crossed it with millions watching. Backstage, staffers rushed to confirm the authenticity of the letter. One source from within the planning committee whispered to a producer, "We were warned someone might make a scene, but not like this." Within minutes, #DenzelTruth and #HeStoodHisGround were trending on every major platform. Late-night hosts were scrambling to rewrite their scripts. Legal analysts were being called to weigh in on whether the leaked document could be tied to election interference. And still, Denzel stood there. Not backing down. Not apologizing. He looked around the grand hall and said, "You don't have to agree with me. But if your first response to someone speaking up is to shut them down, you're not defending democracy. You're afraid of it." He stepped away from the podium, and a roar of applause followed him. He didn't wait for handshakes. He didn't pause for interviews. He walked straight through the crowd, through the center aisle, like a man who had just done the hardest thing in the world, and made it look easy. By the time Denzel exited the building, crowds had already gathered outside, alerted by the breaking news. Chants of "Truth Speaks" and "Let Him Stand" echoed down the marble steps of the Kennedy Center. Dozens of camera crews stood waiting, and still, Denzel said nothing. He raised a hand, not for silence, not for attention, but in quiet recognition of the moment. Then he slipped into a black SUV and disappeared into the night. Inside the venue, a frantic swirl of reactions unfolded. Trump's early exit had only escalated the drama. His team issued a short, blunt press release. The former president did not interfere in any official capacity with tonight's program. Any claim to the contrary is politically motivated and unfounded. But the public didn't buy it. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, every network replayed the moment Trump stood, the whispers, the hot mic, the letter. Legal experts speculated that Denzel's document could trigger a full inquiry. Senate aides were reportedly seeking a closed-door meeting by morning. And then came the real surprise. A quiet, almost overlooked press release issued by retired General Malcolm Stone, who had served as a senior security advisor in the previous administration. It read, "Mr. Washington's document is real. I've seen versions of it. I chose not to speak until now. He has my full support. That endorsement cracked everything wide open. A second trend began, #they knew. Other public figures began speaking out, authors, scholars, former FBI analysts, all sharing similar experiences of being monitored, advised to stay neutral, or deprioritized, in speaking engagements tied to election discussions. Meanwhile, Trump remained silent, visibly shaken in an impromptu video later that night, brushing past reporters outside Mar-a-Lago with only this to say, "He's just an actor." But for once, that line didn't land. Not when the actor had just sparked a political earthquake live on national TV. The morning after the gala, every major newspaper across the country featured Denzel Washington's image on the front page. The speech Trump tried to stop, "Silenced No More," and "Washington versus Washington, D.C." were just a few of the explosive headlines. Cable news shows cleared their schedules. Polls showed a rare phenomenon, bipartisan admiration. Even some conservative voters, long aligned with Trump, admitted, Denzel didn't come for politics, he came with facts. That afternoon, Denzel released a personal statement via video, not through a network, but directly to the public. Standing in front of a plain bookshelf, dressed in a simple gray sweater, he spoke directly into the camera. "I didn't plan what happened last night. But when you're given a platform, and someone tries to rip it away, you've got two choices. Step down quietly, or stand up louder." He paused. "This was never about me. It's about every citizen who's been told to keep quiet. Every journalist who was told to be careful. Every student advised not to share their views if they don't match the tone of the room. That's not democracy. That's control." Within hours, millions had watched and shared the video. Students in college halls started organizing speak-ins. Members of Congress called for hearings. Retired intelligence officials anonymously confirmed that terms like communication risks had circulated in certain internal briefings. But the biggest twist came from within Trump's own orbit. A former legal advisor, once a trusted name in Trump's inner circle, went on record with a chilling confirmation: yes, there were lists. Yes, they were used. And yes, Mr. Trump personally pushed for action against high-profile voices. Denzel Washington was one of them. That interview was scheduled to air Sunday night. Suddenly, what began as a political snub had grown into a full-fledged national reckoning. And Denzel? He wasn't hiding. In fact, he was on his way to speak at Howard University, invited overnight by the student body. As he stepped onto campus, the crowd erupted. The man they tried to remove had just stepped into history. By Sunday morning, the air in Washington, D.C. felt different. Capitol Hill was flooded with urgent meetings. Congressional aides scrambled to prepare for emergency hearings. The Senate Judiciary Committee quietly scheduled a closed session to review the whistleblower documents. Meanwhile, the televised interview with Trump's former legal advisor, Robert Madsen, was set to air that evening. Promos teased a damning revelation, and millions tuned in. At 8 p.m. sharp, the interview began. The lists were real. The goal was simple: suppress influential figures who couldn't be controlled. We were told to treat them like national threats, not because of violence or danger, but because of influence. Denzel Washington was the top of that list. The host asked, "And who signed off on this?" Madsen didn't blink. Donald J. Trump. Personally. He called Denzel a problem. Said he could shift the conversation too easily. America was stunned. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #DenzelFiles, #TruthSuppressed, and #UnmaskTheList dominated the digital landscape. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, demanding accountability. That same night, Denzel posted again. No drama. No monologue. Just a single sentence, captioned beneath a photo of him shaking hands with students at Howard: "Let them come for one voice, just know we stand as thousands." The post shattered records. Then, in a surprising twist, 3 sitting members of Congress, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, publicly called for an independent investigation. And for the first time in years, a joint resolution began forming in the House calling for a special counsel to investigate First Amendment violations during Trump's post-presidency influence operations. In an interview the next morning, a student at Howard summed it up perfectly: they tried to silence Denzel Washington. Instead, he gave this generation its first real lesson in courage. The pressure was mounting, and fast. In the days following Robert Madson's bombshell interview, subpoenas were issued. Private communications were being requested. Congressional aides who once walked confidently through the Capitol now avoided cameras. Legal analysts warned this could snowball into the largest free speech scandal in modern U.S. history. Meanwhile, Trump was losing grip, not just on the narrative, but on his own inner circle. Key donors paused contributions. Longtime allies stopped returning calls. Even some media outlets that once shielded him began shifting tone. In response, Trump released a furious video on his social platform. He looked agitated, standing in front of American flags, pointing aggressively into the camera. Denzel Washington is a Hollywood puppet, nothing more. This is a hit job by the deep state and the fake news. I never ordered anything illegal, and these so-called documents. Lies. Total lies. But the rant backfired. The public wasn't buying it anymore. His approval ratings among independents plummeted. Even conservative veterans like General Hawthorne called his comments reckless and unworthy of a leader. And while Trump unraveled on social media, Denzel did the opposite. He showed up, unannounced, at a small community center in Newark, New Jersey. No cameras. No press. Just a quiet gathering where he spoke with local youth about leadership, courage, and standing tall under pressure. A leaked photo from the event, showing Denzel kneeling beside a group of kids drawing on the sidewalk, went viral with the caption, "The man they feared. The man they tried to erase." Then came the breaking news: a sitting federal judge had granted clearance to unseal several internal memos from the previous administration. The judge's statement was damning. The court has seen preliminary evidence that government authority may have been used to suppress constitutional speech by private citizens. This cannot go unexamined. Trump's legal team scrambled. Denzel remained silent. He didn't need to speak. The truth was already echoing louder than any speech. Monday morning came like a hammer. At 9 a.m., federal court documents were officially unsealed, and they confirmed what many had feared. Over 300 pages of internal memos, emails, and redacted meeting notes revealed a coordinated strategy, discussed and executed during Trump's post-presidency influence campaign, to suppress high-profile public figures deemed culturally disruptive. Denzel Washington's name appeared 7 times in the memos, highlighted, circled, flagged. One memo read, "If DW is given unsupervised airtime during election year events, it could shift moderate opinion. Recommend logistical containment if appearances cannot be cancelled." Another, "Subjects capable of impacting middle-tier voter blocks via moral language are high risk." Denzel W. fits category. Public actions must be discouraged preemptively. The public reaction was seismic. News anchors sat stunned. Congressional leaders, Republican and Democrat alike, called emergency briefings. Protesters filled the National Mall, waving signs that read, "We saw. We heard. We remember." That afternoon, 3 former White House aides were arrested under suspicion of participating in unlawful suppression activities. A special prosecutor was officially appointed by evening. And Denzel? He finally made a national appearance, his first formal interview since the night of the gala. Seated across from the anchor on 60 Minutes, he looked composed, calm, and unmistakably resolved. "This was never about revenge," he said. "It was about accountability. About how far we've drifted from letting truth stand on its own 2 feet. They tried to scare me. But I'm not scared. I'm just awake." The host asked, "What's next for you?" Denzel smiled faintly. What's next? Speaking louder. Helping others do the same. This isn't my fight anymore, it belongs to the people now. And in homes across America, red states, blue states, swing districts, quiet counties, people sat in silence. Not from fear, but from the unmistakable sense that a tide had turned weeks past. But the echoes of that night at the Kennedy Center never faded. Congress convened a full public hearing titled Speech, Power, and Suppression, a National Reckoning. Denzel Washington was invited to testify. He declined. I've said enough. Let the evidence speak now. And it did. The hearings revealed that more than a dozen public figures, activists, artists, professors, had been covertly monitored, denied platforms, or pressured into silence. The entire operation, once dismissed as conspiracy, was now irrefutable. Trump, though not criminally charged, yet, was politically isolated. His allies fractured. His endorsements dried up. His media appearances grew rarer, more desperate. Meanwhile, Denzel took a quieter path. He launched the Free Voice Initiative, a nonpartisan organization designed to protect public speakers, educators, and creatives from political intimidation. Universities partnered. Celebrities joined. Whistleblowers found legal support through the program. And in schools across the country, students now studied the Kennedy Center speech as a modern case of civic courage. But perhaps the most telling moment came during a surprise appearance by Denzel at a small high school in Georgia. No media. No cameras. Just a modest auditorium packed with students and teachers. A girl in the front row stood nervously and asked, "Mr. Washington, why didn't you just walk away when they told you to?" Denzel smiled, knelt down slightly to speak directly to her level, and said, "Because silence doesn't protect you. It only delays the moment when you'll wish you'd spoken up." The room was quiet. And in that quiet, you could hear the sound of something rare and powerful stirring, a country remembering that one voice, used at the right time, can shake even the tallest walls.